Hello again and welcome to another Ourdadsstamps video. In today's video we're going to be looking at the stamps of Sierra Leone. As so often happens when I'm making these videos, the more I delve into countries, the more I realise just how much there is of interest. And that is very much the case in the stamps of Sierra Leone. There's a lot to be looking out for and a lot of interesting stuff, as well as the disasters of the 60s, but we'll talk about those later. However, the rest of the story is really interesting, so stay tuned and hopefully you'll find out more. Sierra Leone is a country in the west of Africa, bordered by Guinea in the north and Liberia in the southeast, and the Atlantic Ocean on the west and southwest. The population is about 8.5 million now, and it was originally set up as a place to resettle slaves that were freed from Great Britain, and ultimately became a British colony. Unlike most British colonies, the stamps of Great Britain were never officially used in Sierra Leone, so you don't get British stamps with a special postmark or anything. In fact, the first stamps were not issued until 1859, and this consisted solely of a sixpenny purple stamp. Now, even with just this one stamp, there's variations to look out for. There's several different recognised shades of the stamp. The first stamp was issued with no watermark, and then again in 1885 it was issued a second time with the Crown CC watermark. So the first thing to look out for is the difference in watermarks and the different shades. But also, each one of these shades and each one of these watermarks was issued with a dot after the 6 and without a dot after the 6. The ones you really want to look for is the ones with the dot after the 6, because they are worth considerably more. In the initial set with no watermark, it can make the difference between the mint stamp being worth £200 or £2,000. So it's definitely worth looking out for, and if you can find one with a dot after the 6, then hold on to it and get a look at the values. Used, they're not worth anything like they are mint, but it still makes a difference. Again, with the first set, it can make the difference between being worth £50 and £500. So, as I said, keep a lookout for that, and if you find one with a dot after the 6, hold on to it. The next set of stamps was not issued until 1872. And then this was a more usual set where there were 5 different values: a penny, threepence, fourpence, shilling and twopence. It was also issued with different watermarks and different perforations. So you can find a Crown CC watermark, sideways and upright. You can find a Crown CC watermark with a 12.5 perf and also a 14 perf. And you can also find a Crown CA watermark with a 14 perf. So again, there's a lot to look out for with this set, and once again it can make a huge difference with the value. The perf 12.5 Crown CC set is worth about £2,000 for the whole set mint and £300 for the whole set used. Whereas by the time you get to the Crown CA perf 14, which was issued in 1884, it's only worth about £130 mint and £65 used. So, as is nearly always the case with older stamps, the watermark makes a huge difference, and it's something you need to look out for. And get yourself a decent watermark detector, whether it's the electronic professional ones or whether it's simply some liquid that you pour on and look at. It makes a big difference, and it's well worth investing in one of those. In 1896, the standard Victorian key type set of 13 stamps was issued. These run from a halfpenny up to £1, and as I often say in these cases, what on earth you would use a £1 stamp for in 1896, I really don't know. But the whole set of 13 stamps is catalogued at £500 mint, but £1,000 used. So in this particular set, and for quite a while afterwards, the used stamps were worth more than the mint stamps. In 1897, we get to a really interesting issue. I can only imagine that these were produced because there was a shortage of stamps, or there was a change in the postal rates. because it involved fiscal stamps being overprinted with the words postage and revenue and tuppence halfpenny on them. The thing was, there were several different settings for the tuppence halfpenny overprint, and these were also overprinted on 4 different values. So you end up with 4 different types of overprint of tuppence halfpenny on a threepenny stamp, 4 different types of overprint on a sixpenny stamp, 5 different types of overprint on a shilling stamp, and 5 different types of overprint on a 2 shilling stamp. So with what would initially appear to be identical stamps, there's a huge amount of variation, and the prices of some of these are quite astronomical, especially on the 2 shilling one. The minimum mint price for the common overprint is £2,500 mint, £3,000 used, whereas it can go up to as much as 55,000 mint and 60,000 used when you get the rarer overprint type. So if you do have one of these stamps, you really need to get a good look and a good idea of which one of the overprints. I would suggest having a professional assessment made of them. When it's worth that amount of money, it's definitely worth whatever it would cost you, and to make sure it's the right assessment. The cheaper end of the scale, the tuppence halfpenny on sixpence, is worth a mere £15 mint, £25 used. So yeah, there's a fair difference between £15 and £55,000, and certainly worth looking out for. When Edward VII came to the throne, the usual key type sets came out with Crown CA watermark and multiple Crown CA watermark, and also in 1907 a colour change of the multiple Crown CA. These run from a halfpenny up to £1, and as is often the case, it's really only the £1 stamp that's worth a lot of money. The rest are fairly affordable, and values are much the same, mint or used, with these. So you're looking at about £400-500 for a set, whether it's the whole set mint or the whole set used, with either watermark. But 300 of that is the £1 stamp. So certainly they're affordable for the lower values, and they're the key type ones, so you see them everywhere, but still nice stamps. And then when George V came to the throne, the same thing. The key type set was issued with multiple Crown CA watermark. The difference here, though, is that a different stamp was used for the threepence, and then from the 1 shilling upwards. And this was a larger format stamp, with a portrait of the king and the badge of the colony underneath it. And these do look quite nice, especially the higher value ones, the black and purple and the blue and purple. And there's even a £5 stamp, which catalogues at £4,500 mint, 5,500 used. Once again, I cannot fathom why there was a £5 stamp issued, but there was, and if you get the chance to get hold of one, it's a very nice looking stamp. Without the £2 and £5 stamps, which are exceptionally valuable, the others you're cataloguing at £400 for the set to £1 and mint, and £650 for the set to £1 used. So again, not hugely out of the question, but probably pushing the boat out a little bit for most people. Then in 1932 we had another King George V set. Sierra Leone was quite productive even in the early days at producing stamps. They seem to have produced a lot more than many other countries. So it's one of the reasons why they are so interesting to collect, but also the amount of variation on the early stamps makes it interesting. In 1932 there was a set with a portrait of George V in the centre with a rice field underneath, and that ran from a halfpenny to a shilling. And then the higher values were a slightly bigger stamp with palm trees on them, and that ran from 2 shillings to £1. This set is quite easily available. If you ignore the £1 value, you're looking at around about £100 mint for the whole set, or £200 used for the whole set. So, as I said, they are reasonably affordable. Certainly up to the shilling, they're very easy to get hold of. And they do look nice as well, so it's worth looking at. This was followed in 1933 by possibly the nicest set out of Sierra Leone stamps. It was a set to commemorate the centenary of the abolition of slavery and the death of William Wilberforce. And it's a set of 13 stamps running from a halfpenny to £1. Only the 10-shilling stamp features a picture of George V. The rest are various images associated with slavery and the freedom of the slaves. But they're a very nice looking set and well worth looking out for. They're not cheap though. The set of 13 would set you back £1,100 mint, £1,600 used. Half of that value is taken up by the £1 stamp again, but it's still quite a pricey set, but very, very nice looking. In 1938, a set was produced for King George VI. And once again, this was a departure from the normal design. It featured a horizontal stamp with King George VI in the left-hand corner and a rectangular frame with an image in the middle. Some of them are two-coloured, some of them are single-coloured stamps. And they run from a halfpenny up to £1. Very nice looking set. But there's two stamps you need to look out for. Certainly mint. Used, they're not worth quite so much. The penny halfpenny and the twopenny stamp were both printed in mauve, and they were both printed in scarlet. So for each value you get two different coloured stamps. The catalogue value of these do make a big difference, so you need to know which ones to look out for. The penny halfpenny stamp, it's the scarlet one that's worth more. It's £20 mint value, whereas the mauve one is only worth 30 pence. For the twopenny stamp, it's the mauve one that's the greater value. That's catalogued at £50 mint, whereas the scarlet one is only at 30 pence. So those two stamps, you need to make sure you get both colours of each value to have the complete set. The whole set of 16 stamps looks really nice when you've got them all together. And it's £150 mint, £90 used catalogue value. So again, I hate to say it's readily affordable because I understand that's a lot of money for some people, but that's a catalogue value. You can generally pick them up for a lot less than that. And I would maintain it's worth getting that set. In 1956, a pictorial Queen Elizabeth set was issued, running from a halfpenny up to £1. Again, a very nice set with Queen Elizabeth in the top left-hand corner and an image of views within Sierra Leone. Nice looking set. They go well together and, as always, look good complete. Catalogue value of £90 mint, £75 used. So, once again, affordable if you push the boat out. In 1961, Sierra Leone gained independence, and they issued a set of new stamps for independence, which are a similar sort of style to the Queen Elizabeth stamps. There's an image of various things associated with Sierra Leone and an inset of the new coat of arms. And yeah, they're quite a nice set, and it's very easy to get hold of. 13 stamps running from a halfpenny up to £1 once again. Catalogue at £24 mint, £28 used. So yeah, easy to get hold of, nice looking and worth having in your collection. In 1963, another nice set came out, which was a departure from the norm. These were a very colourful set, again running from a halfpenny to £1 of 13 stamps. These depicted various flower designs with a plain background and the image of the flower on the front. The catalogue value of this is £18 used, £22 mint. So once again, it's easy to get hold of, and it's a nice looking set. It was in 1963 when things started to get a little bit strange in Sierra Leone, in my opinion anyway. They produced a set of stamps for the second year of independence, which was based on the Queen Elizabeth set from 1956, overprinted with the words second year of independence, progress development 1963, and then a value underneath. But the odd thing about this set is that there are two halfpenny stamps with different value overprints, There are 3 penny halfpenny stamps with different value overprints. There are 5 threepenny stamps with different value overprints, as well as a 2 and 6 and 10 shilling one. So it's really confusing. So you have like threepence overprinted on a half-p stamp and sixpence also overprinted on a half-p stamp. So unless you look really closely, the stamps look identical. The threepenny stamp is even stranger. You've got 10pence overprinted on threepence, 1 and 6 overprinted on threepence, 3 and 6 overprinted on threepence, and then an airmail set with a 3 shilling airmail overprinted on threepence and a 6 shilling airmail overprinted on threepence. So it can get really confusing, and you have to look. I mean, it is fairly obvious, but it just seems a strange thing to do. I can only imagine that there were huge amounts of the penny halfpenny and threepenny stamp left over, and they had to find a way of using them up. Not content with confusing you for that set, though, in the same year, they overprinted a set of stamps to commemorate the oldest postal service, 1853. And these are made up of stamps from several different sets. So once again, it's confusing. There's a threepenny stamp which doesn't have a value overprinted, so that remained a threepenny stamp. Then there's the penny halfpenny stamp overprinted with fourpence, and a penny halfpenny stamp also overprinted with ninepence. Then there's a 1 and threepenny stamp from the Independent set overprinted with a shilling. A halfpenny stamp from the Queen Elizabeth set overprinted with 1 and 6. Another threepenny stamp from the Queen Elizabeth set overprinted with 2 shillings. And then the airmail ones, there is the threepenny stamp from the Royal Visit set overprinted with 7pence. The 1 and threepenny stamp overprinted from the Royal Visit set with no value overprinted. The 2 and 6penny stamp from the Independent set overprinted with 4pence. The 3 shilling stamp from the Royal Visit set overprinted with threepence. The 6penny Royal Visit set overprinted with 6 shillings. And the £1 Queen Elizabeth set without a value overprint on it as well. So it's beginning to get a bit messy in my view, and it does get worse. So when you've got a whole bunch of stamps from Sierra Leone, you have no idea where. It's really confusing of where they fit in the actual sets and what years they come out. So it's something you have to be careful of. And if you bear with me, there's more to come. In 1964, they were the first country to produce self-adhesive stamps. And they produced a set which was a map of Sierra Leone. And the actual stamp was in the shape of the map. And as I said, it was self-adhesive. So if you have the mint ones, you really need the backing paper attached to it. The catalogue value is very, very little. Most of them are only valued at 10pence. I assume loads of them were printed. They should be commended for the innovation of producing A, different shaped stamps, and B, self-adhesive stamps. For me, they confused things then later in the year when they produced a stamp that looks almost identical. It's a self-adhesive stamp. It's in the shape of Sierra Leone. The only difference is the writing on the stamp is different. On the second one, it was to commemorate President Kennedy's memorial. Once again, you have to look a bit carefully to see which one's which. And now we get to my least favourite part of Sierra Leone stamps. To be honest, for me, it is such a jumble. When I get to this stage, I often give up because it is so difficult to sort the stamps. In 1964, they changed the currency, and it went from pounds, shillings and pence to cents and leones. The thing was, rather than produce a new set of stamps, they used all the old ones overprinted with the new currency. The first set in 1964 contained some stamps from the Queen Elizabeth set, some stamps from the Independent set, some stamps from the Royal Visit set, and even some stamps from the self-adhesive ones. And then they repeated this with different types of overprints and different values of overprints. So you've got a whole host of stamps which were issued at different times, but they're all a jumble of different looks, different styles, different amounts. Sometimes they're printed on the same stamp but different values. And I have to say, I find the whole thing totally confusing. And if I do get a whole batch of Sierra Leone stamps, I have to steel myself to try and sort out which one's which and which one fits in which set. In 1965, they went back to producing new designs, and these were all self-adhesive stamps in an array of different shapes and sizes. None of them were the normal rectangular stamp shape, and some of them are quite effective. To the purist, of which I'm probably one, they look a bit more like stickers than they do stamps. However, they are interesting in the fact that these were some of the early stamps, and as I said, they come in different shapes and sizes. There's maps of Africa, there's medallion shaped, there's eagle shaped stamps, there's scroll shaped stamps, a whole range of different shapes and sizes. Generally not worth much at all, but if you're collecting these and you're collecting the mint ones, they really need to be on the backing paper to retain any value. Otherwise they stick to everything and you lose the value of it being a self-adhesive stamp. So there's a lot to choose from. If you like that sort of stamp, there's an awful lot here that and not very expensive at all. The country became a republic in 1971, and although the first issue was stamps in the shape of a lion's head, the later stamps went back to the regular rectangular shape stamps and are much more traditional, shall we say. And in amongst this, there is a lot of thematic stamps that are well worth looking at. There's a couple of nice birds set, one issued in 1980 and another in 1992. There's a butterfly set in 1987. But by the end of the 1980s, early 1990s, like many countries, they were producing stamps on anything and everything. So there's a huge range of things, that most of which are not really worth a lot of money and, in my view, not particularly collectible. However, if you're a thematic collector, then rather than trying to collect all Sierra Leone stamps at this point, you have a look at the theme that you're interested in. I'm sure you'll be able to find something along those lines, if not several things in those lines, in Sierra Leone stamps. As I said at the beginning, there's an awful lot there. Some good, some bad, some valuable, some not very valuable, but certainly interesting. And I hope you've enjoyed this look at the stamps of Sierra Leone, and I hope to see you again in a few weeks' time. Thank you for watching, and see you again soon.